the Olympics. Kazuo, the Olympics in Tokyo are coming up. And, we saw in the United States that one of the first applications of 5G technologies were at the Super Bowl and other places and very large scale gatherings to ensure the level of connectivity. I'll start with Kazuo, but if anybody would like to answer, there was a question about the Tokyo Olympics and the extent to which 5G will be tested and deployed in Japan and become a use case for the type of ubiquitous deployment that we'd like to see.
Yes, thank you for the question. Reality for me is I'm living in the U.S. and I do not travel to Tokyo these days, so I don't have the very, very hot information on that. But Olympics, as you may know, is a great timing to push some new things to see in the past Tokyo Olympics. Many things, TVs and transportation started. 5G is part of it for the innovation ecosystem to watch, regardless. So Tokyo 2020 become 2021 will happen. How you can to watch the real the games in reality, virtual reality could be utilized, and so where and which angle. Some people are very keen on the particular athletes or some game scene repeated, but the 5G is helping those virtual reality or checking through iPhones. Some balls are coming from that angle, with some particular person. So those are enablers, the cases of the games happening as far as I understand. But the transportations and for the people's convenience, the people visiting from all over the world, if everything goes fine, so 5G can enable for the convenience for many things, including robotics and so on. That's a great thing. But how to secure is another thing. From London Olympics to, there are some digitized, but they are also vulnerable, in a sense, how to make sure that these works well from the opening towards the end. So 5G is an enabler for all in all for the touching point for the people.
Yeah, no, I agree. And anybody want to respond as well? Because I think it's going to be a very interesting use case based on the conversation that we're having right now. Anybody else want to respond on the 2021 Olympics? And like you said, if it actually happens, is a whole nother story. But the enablement of 5G in these large scale settings, I think will be a great replication of the future to come. Anyone else?
I'm excited and optimistic that there are now several vaccine candidates. And
yes,
on that point, I'd speak to, I think the importance, if we are going to see a 2021 Olympics, of trying to combat mis and disinformation around 5G and around a vaccine going forward, since these unfortunately are topics upon which there can be a lot of conspiracy theorizing, whereas on both fronts, I think a vaccine will be critical if we're going to move forward as a society, and 5G will be an important in some of these near-term test cases and of long-term consequences as we think about health going forward.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And thank you for bringing that point up, Elsa, because I also think about, when I think about the example that I gave with the Olympics, we spent a lot of time on urban connectivity with 5G. And really, we should be thinking about the seamless nature between using 5G for rural connectivity as well. Just like in the United States, Japan also has huge areas topographically that are very complicated to connect with fiber, but yet we can actually see 5G as one of those game-changing technologies that brings more people in. That's why I like to think of 5G as an inclusive technology, and not sure what other people think in terms of, again, creating much more continuity between urban and rural areas or large areas where the connectivity is needed to enable the use cases that we started with. Yuka or Muriel, you want to comment on that? And then I'm going to go to audience Q&A. But any thoughts on that in terms of 5G becoming one of those enablers to just connect rural, urban? We'll go to Yuka and then Muriel will go to you.
Right. I think that's a great point. And I think just brief comment on the Olympic 2021. I've been hearing a lot of, the Japanese 5G, all the four telecom operators have launched a certain kind of 5G, although the areas are still limited. Seems like lots of comments from the consumer side on the user side, especially the smartphone, because 5G is more about how the application side, they haven't really been positive about their user experience yet. So I think this Tokyo Olympic, if it happened, I hope it happens, but would be an interesting case to see diverse different kind of applications or different kind of experience on the citizen side. And in terms of the continuation of the urban experience in the real network, I think that's a great point. And just looking even from the policy side, when the government decided to allocate spectrums and to these operators, the Japanese government have introduced a different kind of measurement. Previously, they were looking at how much the population is covered by the base station provided by these operators, but now they've kind of changed it to more on the geographical kind of criteria on how much it covers. So I think because this has industrial applications, not just about smartphone and not about how many people are connected in the urban space. I think I do agree with you and share your view that it's an inclusive technology.
Yes, Muriel?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to make two separate points. So I think that a lot of these are not only technology. I mean, in the US in particular, as you recall, that there was a movement to having a lot of municipal fiber companies, and that was shut down. And that was shut down by very heavy lobbying of incumbent companies, not at the federal level, which would be too expensive, but on a state by state. Okay. So part of it is just that was by design, not necessarily by necessity. I mean, not to say that technology can't help, by all means, of course, that's what we do. But I want to also separate, looking at the status and saying, well, that's because of technological reasons, and looking at the status and realizing what's not for technological reasons. With respect to the user experience that Yuka mentioned, I was very happy you brought that up. Remember at the very beginning, I talked about desiderata, okay? And people often think of bandwidth, and particularly providing more allocation of spectrum, as providing better speed. It is a very wasteful way of providing better speed. And for a lot of applications, and I'll basically talk about gaming, but I want you to think of gaming writ large, all, AR, all virtual reality, augmented reality, virtual reality, basically where you may not actually have a huge number of a large amount of data going through. It's just that you want it very quickly and at the right time. Okay, that is not a matter of just throwing more bandwidth necessarily. That's one way of getting it, but it's massively wasteful of what is in effect a social good, which is the bandwidth. Again, currently, since the incumbents are trying to sell equipment, they're not particularly incentivized to do anything other than sell more equipment. And I think we really need to realize again that the engineering reality. There are many technologies out there which have been shown that what they would do is basically require far less infrastructure. By again, these are things that are happening by having coding and other things done. So, why, going back to that umbilical relation between traditional service providers and traditional equipment providers, and again, don't get me wrong, they do some fantastic stuff, but that's not the correct incentivization, and that's the way it is in terms of the engineering.
No, I totally agree with that. I think I've spoken about that as well. It's like we have to look at 5G technologies, and I think all of you have said this, and I'm going to go to a couple of questions in our remaining time, but we have to look at 5G technology, not just for the commercial, experiences that people want, how quickly you can download a movie, how fast. But if you just go back to Tokyo 2021, if by chance the vaccination doesn't make it safe enough, I'm just putting this out there, my fingers are crossed, to travel, Imagine the use of the technology can actually enable the games where people can experience those all over the world. Imagine the extent to which young people who may not have the abilities to actually become a track and field runner can put in an AR, VR headset and actually experience the runner that is making it to the second or the third aspect of the finish line. To me, those are the exciting applications of 5G because it allows us to repurpose and retransform how we actually conduct day-to-day services. And it becomes a critical infrastructure. And that's what the pandemic, as Elsa sort of talked about, has showed us. We need more critical infrastructure to be able to get the work done, and internationally in a way that is very cooperative and collaborative.